Hey, what's up guys? Quinn here. Welcome back to another video. For today's video, I'm going to be updating you on my Waterbox 20 cube Nano Reef tank. The subject of the video will be 6 different tips for beginning reefers. I came up with this list based on things that I wish I would have done differently when I set up my tank. I think this list will be great for people that are just getting into this side of the hobby and want to have a successful reef tank from the start. Before we get into it, I would ask for you to please consider subscribing to our channel. We really appreciate the support. And without further ado, let's dive right in. All right, so my first tip is how to build your filtration. The most important thing I can say is don't try to do too much. Keep it simple.
The less you do, the more you do. That's not it at all.
You always want to start with your mechanical filtration, followed by your chemical filtration, and then your biological filtration. When I first got this tank, I was so pumped to get a skimmer and a refugium going. However, I think it did more harm than good. In a small, all-in-one tank like I have, there's only so much room for filtration, so you need to make sure you pick the most efficient methods. For me, the refugium became a major problem because it brought unwanted pests into my tank, such as apitasia, and also gave it a safe haven to live in my tank. More on this later. Also, the refugium is great for removing nitrates, but with such a small tank, it's kind of overkill, especially with the skimmer. I decided to get rid of the refugium and totally clean out the back middle chamber. In addition, I took all my bio balls out of the filter bag and let them float freely. This way, the filter bag isn't accumulating any detritus or excess nutrients for the algae to grow with. To complete the middle chamber, I added Chemi Pure Blue. If you aren't using this chemical media, I would highly recommend it. It is fantastic at clearing your water up and taking out most excess nutrients from your water. I've noticed a major difference with this. I also moved the skimmer to the middle chamber and added an additional coarse sponge under the filter sock for more mechanical filtration. I cannot stress to you enough how important it is to clean your mechanical filtration at least twice a week. The next tip I have is to do weekly water changes and not bi-weekly water changes. The general rule of thumb for water changes is to do a 25% water change every 2 weeks. However, from my experiences with my freshwater tanks in my classroom, I know what the value of weekly water changes has had on my tanks. When I started up my Nano Reef tank, I started off by doing bi-weekly water changes, especially because I was hauling my salt water from a local fish store for each water change. However, my tank was suffering with cloudy water and tons of algae growth. I switched up to a 25% water change every week, and the difference has been stunning. My parameters have been much more consistent and the water clarity has been crystal clear with much less algae growth. Also, more consistent water changes replenishes the nutrients that the coral needs to grow and be healthy. So as I'm sure you probably saw, a ton of algae just came off the back wall. So I definitely recommend doing that part during a water change so that you can get all of that algae out of the water with the water change. Coming in at number 3 on the list is adding inverts, or should I say the right inverts. My recommendation is getting a crew of reef grazing hermit crabs to battle algae on your rocks. They are machines at eating algae. Next, I would buy a handful of Nacarius snails. These snails are great at burrowing underneath the substrate and shuffling it up, not allowing any algae to consistently grow on your sand bed. The other inverts I would recommend are peppermint shrimp. These guys have a major appetite for apitasia. As I mentioned earlier, I had a major outbreak of apitasia in my tank. These pests can multiply very rapidly and sting or even kill your coral. The peppermints clean them up right away and I can no longer find any apitasia in my tank.
Voila, he is clean.
Coming in at number 4 is doing the proper daily maintenance of your tank. First up is to clean the glass every day. For nano tanks, if you don't have the Flipper Nano magnetic scraper, you're missing out.
Philadelphia. Yeah.
It's extremely easy to glide around the tank and the blade end is paramount for scraping the tough algae off the glass and also getting underneath the sand. Speaking of sand, stirring up the sand every few days has proven essential. This helps, along with the Nacarius snails, to prevent any brown algae from making a home on your sand bed and keep your sand looking pearly white. The final thing I would do each day is monitor for any algae outbreaks and manually clear algae when needed. I do this with a wired test tube brush. This helps out the hermit crabs with clearing your rocks of algae and keeps your rocks looking pristine. Just watch out for the Oscularis biting you. My gladiator is extremely aggressive and bites my hand most times when I put it in the tank. Number 5 is an obvious one, but an essential one. You need to check your parameters every single week. Pick a consistent time and day each week to test your water. You don't need any expensive equipment to do this. All you need is the API Reef Master Test Kit. You need the Salifert Magnesium Test Kit. And also, you need a refractometer to test for salinity. This will give you all the water parameters you need for a successful reef tank. I would recommend keeping a log of your parameters so you can monitor the fluctuations over time. I'm a big spreadsheet guy, so I input my parameters on Google Sheets seen here. You can see I flagged my magnesium and salinity as they both fell a little low. This guides me in my dosing regimen for each trace element. One other thing to keep in mind is temperature control. I've recently added a heater to my ATO reservoir and got an extra one to put in the saltwater container before water changes. These are very important steps to keeping a stable temperature in your tank. I like to think of the tank temperature as your own body temperature. A fluctuation of only a few degrees can cause major problems in your body or even lead to death. The same can be said for your reef tank. The final tip I have for new reefers is to find the right lighting for your tank. For starters, I would recommend not turning your light on at all as it's cycling. There's no need for lighting your tank without fish or coral. I made this mistake because I liked the way my light looked. However, all this did was give algae a major head start to take over my tank. Next, when you have fish and coral, it's all about finding the right balance between lights on and off and the color spectrum. The light schedule that has finally seemed to work well for me on my AI Prime is this. The sun rises at noon and it sets at 9 p.m., giving 9 hours of full spectrum. I set my blues and purples to 70%, green, reds, and moonlight to 5%, and cool white to 15%. This schedule has worked great so far. However, nothing is ever perfect, so I will continue to monitor and make adjustments to my light settings if needed. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. I hope you found these tips helpful, and we'll be sure to keep you updated on my Nano Reef tank in the future. Once again, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next week.